What's all the commotion?
We've got another holiday to worry about.
We've done a lot of very successful holiday shows for Christmas, for Halloween, and we really wanted to do something for Thanksgiving.
The Charlie Brown Thanksgiving show was, I call it one of the big three.
Working on this crazy Peanuts project was a great deal of fun to us as animators. Oh boy.
The Thanksgiving special is filled with tradition.
Has to do with family, has to do with gathering of everybody that you love.
It's the fellowship of all the people, including the bird and the dog.
I think every kid, no matter how much they like turkey and mashed potatoes, secretly hopes that someday they will actually be served a Thanksgiving dinner consisting of jelly beans and popcorn. The Thanksgiving show is interesting in that actually most of it is not based on material from the comic strip. I think it's actually probably one of the first specials where they pretty much winged it and wrote a completely original script.
Mr. Schultz, he came up with this whole idea of all the things that can go wrong in the kitchen when preparing the meal.
What appealed to my husband was that everybody's expectation is that this has to be the dinner of the year.
Thanksgiving sometimes are a lot of hustle and bustle just to get this one meal done, and tempers can kind of get a little short.
Where's the turkey, Chuck? Don't you know anything about Thanksgiving dinners?
None of that ever bothered Sparky. He would say, what difference does it make? Sparky just didn't care about the dressing or the linen or the silverware.
He just thought that was very humorous and we should do a show about it, and we did.
This is not unlike another famous Thanksgiving episode. Do you remember the story of John Alden and Captain Miles Standish?
This isn't like that one at all.
In a Charlie Brown Christmas, we decided to use real children as the voices of the characters, not to use adult actors playing children, as had been the case of all the cartoons before that.
One thing the producers worked hard to do in all subsequent specials is match the sound of the voices from the original special.
And of course, we would audition kids all over Northern California and Southern California for each show, and we were having trouble finding a Charlie Brown. And thank goodness we found a perfect Charlie Brown, because we were running out of time.
There was about 10 kids I whittled it down to, and they chose me to do the voice of Charlie Brown.
Hey, Peppermint Patty, great news.
When Peppermint Patty came along later on, we had no idea what the voice should be.
The first Peppermint Patty was done by a girl's voice, but in a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, the voice of Peppermint Patty was done, in fact, by a young boy.
You're holding my hand, Chuck. You sly dog.
A lot of people have asked me whether or not it bothered me that I was voicing a girl, and I don't think it ever occurred to me, because it was such a cool thing to do. I had a deviated septum when I was born, so one nasal passage was completely clogged, which meant I permanently had a cold, which led to the gravelly voice, which led to my being cast as a role.
Sure, only this is the way it goes. Over the river and through the woods to
Grandmother's house we go.
It's an interesting thing about being the voice of one of these characters. If you look at a Charlie Brown special, there's actually very few minutes that you're actually speaking. We didn't have to memorize anything, and we'd sit at a podium with a boom mic coming down.
When we read with Bill Melendez, it was a complete line reading. He would say, "Hello, Charlie." You go, "Hello, Charlie." You do exactly what he said.
He was really helpful in helping us sort of articulate how the scene was going to go. He would explain how it was going to play out.
How do I always get into these things? Now she's bringing Marcy, too. It's your own fault, because you're so wishy-washy.
At the time, I couldn't read. Bill Melendez would tell me what to say and how to say it, so I would just repeat it. And it wasn't work, it was kind of play to me.
I haven't even finished eating all my Halloween candy.
There were no adults in the Peanuts comic strip. So when we started to do the television shows and we were going to have adults in the strip, we didn't quite know how to handle that.
So they're off-screen in the comic strip, so bringing them into the animated specials would have been kind of disconcerting.
And then Vince Guaraldi said, you know, maybe if we use a trombone or a saxophone or something, we could simulate an adult voice.
It was a natural thing for us to do at the time. I tell the trombonist, say this sentence in trombone. He'd say, what? Wah, 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 beep, 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 bah, bah.
And it's just strange how a little afterthought can be such an impressionable thing for 40 years in people's minds of all generations.
As the show went on, the characters kept evolving and being fine-tuned. And because the strip was changing also, we had to stay up with what Sparky's doing on the comic strip. The big difference in the production of the Thanksgiving show was the action.
I remember one thing in that show is that Sparky, Mr. Schultz, wanted Snoopy to have this ferocious battle with the chair. And we didn't do that too often in most of the shows.
There's not that many opportunities for action scenes within the show because the characters, they don't lend themselves to have action. But Snoopy did. Snoopy was the most animatable character.
There was an animation gag to us that we can only do in animation. Certainly can't get a chair to suddenly start fighting with anybody.
Those lawn chairs, always impossible to put together. So you carry it to the next degree where you make it a real character that's fighting you.
So we discussed it and made drawings and set it up, and it turned out to be a very good scene.
Some of the best moments in those shows are the moments when Snoopy and Woodstock are just doing something together, and there's no words, there's a nice song sometimes underscoring them, but what you get from them is that friendship between them, the bond.
They became like a Laurel and Hardy or something, just funny business.
Even without dialogue, somehow the animators managed to establish a true relationship with those characters.
There was one scene in that show that has always offended me greatly. And I had long discussions with Bill Melendez, the animator, and Sparky when they drew it up. And I looked at it in horror and I said, you cannot have a bird eating a turkey.
There are references to Thanksgiving in the comic strip. Woodstock worries that he's going to be mistaken for a turkey and get eaten.
Snoopy says, poor Woodstock, he has to hide this time of year. And so Sparky, if he didn't take it to heart then, he took it to heart later in the comic strips.
I hope so.
And protects poor Woodstock.
And of course it went in the show and it's one of the scenes that everybody remembers.
But it is kind of funny, but it doesn't seem to bother Woodstock or Snoopy, so why should it bother us? A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving opens with one of its better remembered scenes, which is Lucy trying to convince Charlie Brown to kick the football, which she is, of course, going to pull away.
You'll pull it away and I'll land flat on my back and kill myself.
It represents one of the iconic themes and reoccurring themes of the comic strip. But again, that all happens in your head, whereas in the TV specials, they are able to animate it and you actually see Charlie Brown flying up into the air and crashing with a really loud thud.
That's probably the scene that I remember most vividly of any of the voice work that I did during the Charlie Brown years. That scene was a difficult scene. They were looking for the classic ARG. So Bill Melendez came in and set that scene up for me, and he scripted it out. He said, Todd, Lucy's gonna pull the football, you're Charlie Brown, you're trusting her so much. Well, I gave it a shot, and take one, Charlie Brown, voiceover, Lucy football scene, take two, take three, take four. Anyway, it was 24 takes into it that they finally pulled the plug and said, we think we need to get a different voice. And I believe that they actually got an adult to do the voice. So that's actually not my voice in that particular ARG moment.
Isn't it peculiar, Charlie Brown, how some traditions just slowly fade away?
Those little moments kind of define the characters, define Lucy, define Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown is always willing to try, always have faith that maybe this time he'll succeed, which is sort of Charlie Brown's whole attitude to life is despite continued disappointments, he's always willing to try again.
But that's the essence of comic strips, is the same things happen over and over again. And you know it's going to happen, and yet you keep going back.
I think because we all struggle with our lives every day, And yet we have to get up and persevere the next day and the next day. That his struggles are our struggles, and I think we identify with Charlie Brown.
And people wanted him to kick the football, but as Sparky said, that's not funny. You know, once he kicks the football, the whole thing's over.
Actually, his voice ends the memorial service. It was a disembodied voice, him saying, well, that poor kid, he never got to kick the football. What a dirty trick, he never got to kick the football. I just got that impression from him that had he had a chance, he would have had Charlie Brown kick the football. You know, I mean, why not? Why not have him kick it once?
Charlie Brown Thanksgiving aired for the first time on November 20th, 1973, and it was, like all the specials that preceded it, very well received. And it went on to win an Emmy Award.
I think there's something about Thanksgiving because it is so iconic.
Just the themes of it I thought were interesting. I just thought it's funny that the story also had more facets to it. I thought just a lot of things were going on.
It was about the unity of people that you care about.
Amen.
This incredible feeling when you watch these shows that they're not selling you. It's not in your face. It's so different than animation today. And I think that's one of the reasons why they remain charming after all these years.
Throughout the strip, the 18,000 strips that Mr. Schultz drew, and the 65 shows that we produced for television, there is a consistency. So although there were new themes and new stories we came up with, the characters always stayed the same in the strip and on the shows. And I think that's why the strip and the shows have remained popular all these years, because people know what to expect and can't wait for it to happen again. It's like visiting old friends.